Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The air in that hotel suite felt different the moment we walked in, thicker, charged, like the silence before thunder. My husband Marcus had been different lately. Not distant, exactly. More like waiting. Watching me with this half-smile that made my skin prickle. We'd been married 6 years, and I thought I knew every version of him. But that night, sitting across from our new friends at dinner, I realized I didn't know this Marcus at all, the one who kept his hand on my thigh under the table while asking Jax about his photography work. Jax and Elena were magnetic in that effortless way some couples have. She laughed with her whole body. He had these artist's hands, rough, deliberate, always adjusting his camera strap like he was ready to capture something. The four of us kept finding reasons to touch, passing the wine, brushing shoulders in the narrow hallway to the restroom, Elena's fingers lingering on Marcus's arm when he told a joke. By midnight, we were back in their suite. Someone suggested a game. Truth or dare, but softer. More dangerous. Marcus took off his shirt first. Claimed he was warm. But I knew my husband, he was preparing me for something, setting the stage. The camera appeared, casually, Jax adjusting the settings like this was any other Tuesday. But his eyes kept finding mine, questioning, offering. "You're beautiful when you're nervous," Marcus whispered, not to me, but loud enough for the room to hear. And I was nervous, my pulse hammering in my throat, my hands finding my own knees, squeezing. Not because I didn't want what was coming. Because I wanted it more than I wanted to admit, even to myself. Elena poured more wine. The couch shifted as Marcus settled back, his chest bare, his gaze heavy and patient. Jax moved closer. The lens cap came off with a soft click that sounded like a door unlocking. "Tell me what you want," Jax said, his voice low, respectful but sure. I looked at my husband. He nodded once, permission, command, I still don't know which. The carpet was soft beneath my knees. The room went quiet except for my breathing and the camera's tiny red light blinking, recording everything. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and when I glanced up at him, really looked, his expression stopped my heart. Not jealousy. Not even lust exactly. Something hungrier. Something that said he'd been waiting his whole life to see me like this, unguarded, chosen, seen. "Go ahead," he breathed. "Show him." And I realized then that the stranger wasn't Jax at all. The stranger was me. I'd never seen Marcus watch me like that. 6 years of marriage, and his eyes had always held comfort. "You're safe, I'm here, nothing will hurt you." But that night, his gaze carried something razor-sharp. "I want to see you when no one's protecting you." We'd met Jax and Elena 3 months ago at a gallery opening downtown. Marcus's architecture firm had designed the space. Jax was shooting the exhibition. I remember how Elena touched my arm when she laughed, how she leaned in to smell my perfume and declared it dangerous. They felt like people who lived without doors, without locks, and I couldn't stop wondering what that freedom tasted like. The friendship deepened fast, dinners where conversations lingered until restaurants closed, texts that arrived at midnight with inside jokes, the four of us becoming something neither couple could name. Marcus started asking questions I didn't have answers for. "What attracts you to someone?" He'd murmur against my neck in bed. "Do you ever wonder what it would feel like to be truly seen?" I thought he meant emotionally. I was wrong. Now, kneeling on that carpet with Jax's camera recording and Marcus's eyes burning into me, I understood he'd been preparing us both. The shirtless man on the couch wasn't my husband anymore. He was a director, a witness, someone stripping away every role I'd ever played. Good wife, safe choice, predictable heart. "You're shaking," Jax said quietly. He hadn't touched me yet. His camera stayed up, but he'd lowered it slightly, catching my expression rather than my body. "We can stop." But Marcus shook his head. "She doesn't want to stop." His voice was gentle, certain, the way he sounds when he knows me better than I know myself. "Ask her what she wants, Jax. Make her say it out loud." The words caught in my throat. I wanted to be angry at him for orchestrating this, at myself for melting under the attention of two men, at the camera for making it real. But my anger kept twisting into something hotter, something that felt like finally breathing after years of holding my breath. Elena appeared beside Marcus, perching on the arm of the couch. She wore one of his shirts. I realized my husband's shirt, and the casual intimacy of it sent a jolt through me. Not jealousy. Recognition. She was showing me how easy it could be to step outside the lines. "Your husband talks about you constantly," she said, her voice honeyed. "How brave you are. How much you surprise him." She reached down, her fingers brushing Marcus's shoulder, and he didn't flinch. "He wanted to see you unleashed." "We all do." Jax set the camera on the coffee table, still running, and moved closer. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, wood smoke, and something citrus. Close enough that his knee almost touched mine. "Tell me what you want," he repeated, and this time it wasn't a question. It was an invitation to become someone I hadn't met yet. I looked at Marcus one last time. He mouthed two words, "Trust me." And I realized the boundary I was about to cross wasn't physical. It was the wall between the woman I'd been promised I should be and the woman who'd been waiting in the dark, hungry to be chosen for her chaos, not her calm. My hand found Jax's knee. The camera light blinked red. And somewhere in the silence, I heard myself whisper, "I want to stop being good." The words hung in the air like smoke, visible and dangerous. I hadn't planned to say them. They'd torn themselves from somewhere I'd kept locked since before Marcus, before marriage, before I learned to fold myself into smaller, more manageable shapes. Jax's hand found mine. His palm was rough, calloused from camera work, from rock climbing trips Elena had mentioned, from living a life that left marks. I realized I didn't know his last name. I'd let my husband's shirt touch this man's wife, and I didn't know if he was left-handed or where he grew up or what he feared at 3 a.m. "Marcus," I whispered, not a plea but an anchor. "Tell me you want this." My husband stood. The camera kept recording, indifferent red eye blinking. He crossed the space between us slowly, deliberately, and I understood this was the architecture of him I'd never seen, the man who designed spaces for a living, now designing a moment where the walls between us might finally collapse. "I want to see you without my protection," he said, kneeling beside me. His bare shoulder brushed mine, familiar heat against the unfamiliar electricity of Jax's hand still holding mine. "Not because I don't love you. Because I love who you are when you're not performing us." Elena moved behind Jax, her fingers tracing his jaw before tilting his face toward her. She kissed him, slow, possessive, instructional, and I watched him respond, watched his grip on my hand tighten as if grounding himself. When she pulled back, her eyes found mine over his shoulder. "Jax lost his first wife to caution," she said quietly. "She wanted safety more than she wanted him. He won't make that mistake again." Her smile held edges. "And I won't let him." The subplot revealed itself then, sharp as broken glass. We weren't four people experimenting. We were two couples carrying damage, using each other as mirrors. Marcus and his architectural control, building experiences to test what we could survive. Jax and Elena with their lost and found desperation, collecting intensity to prove they were alive. "Your hands are cold," Jax murmured to me, rubbing warmth into my fingers. But his eyes cut to Marcus, questioning, asking permission from the wrong person. "Warm her up," Marcus said, and the command in his voice made me shiver. Not because I obeyed him, because I recognized that tone. He'd used it in meetings, with interns, with people he needed to manage. He'd never used it with me. I should have felt reduced. Instead, I felt seen finally, completely, the way a blueprint sees a building before it exists. Elena settled onto the carpet beside me, her thigh pressing against mine through the thin silk of my camisole. "The first time Jax filmed me with someone else," she said, her breath warm against my ear, I cried afterward. Not from shame. From relief. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and didn't know it. "And now?" I asked. "Now I breathe deeper when he's watching." She took my other hand, interlacing our fingers. Two men, two women, for hands connected in a chain of questionable decisions. The question isn't whether you'll cross the line, sweetheart. It's whether you'll ever want to step back. Marcus reached for the camera, adjusted the angle. The lens caught the sheen on my collarbone, the way Elena's borrowed shirt gaped when she leaned forward, the hunger in Jax's expression that he wasn't hiding anymore. Tell the camera what you want, Marcus instructed, his voice steady as steel. Make it real enough to keep. I opened my mouth to answer, but Elena kissed me first. Soft, curious, tasting of wine and something darker. Not a performance. An interruption. A claim. And in the shocked silence that followed, with my husband's camera rolling and Jax's breath catching and Elena's lips still hovering millimeters from mine, I heard the door to the suite click, not opening. Locking. The lock clicked with finality, and something in the room shifted from suggestion to inevitability. Elena pulled back just enough for her breath to ghost across my lips, her thumb tracing the line of my jaw with devastating gentleness. Marcus locked it, she whispered, not to me but to the room, to the camera, to whatever gods watched people destroy themselves beautifully. Your husband doesn't want rescue to be easy. I should have felt trapped. Instead, I felt chosen. Selected for this specific annihilation, this unbecoming. The camera's red light pulsed like a heartbeat, and I realized Marcus had been planning this for months. The questions in bed, the careful cultivation of Jax and Elena, the slow erosion of every boundary I'd mistaken for identity. Look at me, Marcus commanded, and I did. He'd set the camera on tripod, freeing his hands, and now he stood behind Jax with an expression I'd never seen, architect and arsonist, creator and destroyer, my husband and a total stranger sharing one face. Tell me what you're feeling. Exact words. No performance. My throat worked. Elena's thigh pressed harder against mine, grounding me in the physical when language felt impossible. Jax's hand had migrated to my knee, his thumb drawing circles that burned through silk, and I realized all three of them were touching me now, Elena's face, Jax's palm, Marcus's gaze like physical weight. Like I'm drowning, I finally said, voice raw. Like I've been drowning for years and just noticed I love the water. Jax made a sound low, broken, younger than he'd seemed before. He'd been holding himself back with visible effort, his photographer's discipline warring with something hungrier. Elena, he said, not a plea but a warning. I can't, yes you can, she interrupted, fierce and tender. You can watch her become. That's all. That's enough. But her own control was fraying. I could feel it in the tremor where our shoulders touched, in the way her fingers had drifted from my jaw to the sensitive hollow of my throat. Marcus moved closer, crouching behind Jax so they formed a tableau, two men, one clothed and one bare, both fixed on me with identical intensity. The first time I saw you, my husband said, his voice dropping to register that vibrated in my sternum, you were laughing at someone else's joke. Performing connection. I spent 6 years wondering who you'd be if you stopped performing. And now, I managed. Now I know. He reached past Jax, his hand hovering near my face without touching, always the architect, designing spaces between people. You're magnificent when you're real. When you're not sure you should want something but you want it anyway. When you're caught between who you were promised and who you're becoming. Elena shifted, her weight pressing me slightly off balance, so I had to catch myself on Jax's shoulder. The movement brought us impossibly close, his cologne and her perfume and my own fear sweat mixing into something intoxicating. The camera recorded everything, the sheen on my collarbone, the way Jax's Adam's apple bobbed when he swallowed, the precise angle of Elena's borrowed shirt falling off one shoulder to reveal the strap of my husband's undershirt beneath. Kiss her again, Marcus instructed, and this time it wasn't clear which her he meant. Elena understood before I did. She turned not to me, but to Jax, capturing his mouth with a hunger that made me understand their marriage. They devoured each other with the desperation of people who'd learned that love without risk was merely cohabitation. And I watched, transfixed, as Marcus watched me watching, the camera catching every micro-expression, every hitch of breath, Every moment I leaned closer instead of pulling away. When they broke apart, Jax's eyes found mine immediately. Rescue me or join me, I couldn't tell. His hand on my knee had stilled, pressure increasing almost painfully. Elena's lips were swollen, her gaze drifting between us with the satisfaction of someone who'd orchestrated collision. Your turn, she breathed against my ear, her hand finding the small of my back, pressing me forward. Choose. Stay safe with the camera between you. Or, the oar hung unfinished, electric, inevitable. Marcus adjusted the tripod one final time, framing us perfectly. The lock held. The city lights pulsed outside. And Jax leaned in, close enough that I could count his eyelashes, could feel the heat radiating from his skin, could taste the wine on his breath mixing with my own anticipation. His lips parted. My eyes fluttered closed. The camera's red light held steady, witness and accomplice, and Marcus whispered, "Say his name first. Make him real to you. Make this real." Jax, I breathed, and the name felt like a spell breaking, his realness flooding into the space between us, making every previous second feel like preamble. But the kiss didn't land. Elena's hand tightened on my back, arresting my forward motion with surprising strength. "Wait," she whispered, and something in her voice, raw, ragged, desperate, froze us all. "Marcus. Show her. Before she chooses without knowing." My husband's expression didn't change, but his hand found the camera's playback button. The screen flickered to life, casting blue-white light across his bare chest. He'd recorded before tonight. Hours of footage I didn't know existed. 3 months, he said, angling the screen so I could see. Every question I asked you in bed. Every fantasy you whispered half asleep. Every name you never said aloud but wrote in your journal. The footage played, me, alone in our bedroom, thinking I was unobserved. The angle was from his closet. He'd installed a camera, capturing me touching myself with his name on my lips, then, increasingly, other names. Strangers from coffee shops. Characters from films. And finally, devastatingly, Jax from the night we'd all danced at that wedding, his hand on my waist, my head tipped back laughing at something he'd murmured against my ear. "You wanted him before I suggested him," Marcus said, no accusation in his voice, only confirmation. "You wanted this before I built it. I'm not corrupting you, love. I'm delivering you." The second twist wasn't the surveillance, it was the realization that I'd been performing even my private moments, choreographing desire for an audience of one who wasn't there. And that Marcus, understanding this, had simply made the audience real. Elena released my back, but only to reach for Jax's hand, drawing it from my knee to her own thigh. "We have footage too," she said, her voice steadier now, strategic. "Jax watched yours first. That's why he agreed to this. He saw how you looked at him when you thought no one would notice." Jax's jaw tightened, shame and arousal warring in his expression. "I told myself it was protection. That I'd catch you wanting me, prove you were safe to ignore." His laugh was bitter, broken. "I watched you 37 times. I know the sound you make when you're close. I know you bite your lip at the end. I know," he stopped, throat working. "I know I was lying about protection. I wanted to be wanted that specifically. That obsessively." The room's geometry reconfigured. We weren't 4 people experimenting anymore. We were 4 conspirators, each carrying secret archives of longing, each guilty of the same crime, wanting more than we'd promised, and hiding that want in shadows until someone brave enough turned on the lights. Marcus killed the playback. The red recording light returned, hungry, patient. "The choice isn't Jax or me anymore," he said. "It never was. The choice is whether you'll let us all see you, the footage, the wanting, the performance, and the truth behind it. Whether you'll stop being good for an audience of ghosts and be real for witnesses who can touch you." Elena stood, shedding my husband's shirt in one fluid motion, revealing lace and skin, and the topography of a body that had also been filmed, also been watched, also learned to crave exposure as validation. She extended her hand to me, not commanding, offering. "Or there's a third option," she said, her voice dropping to register that vibrated physically in my chest. We stop pretending this is about couples. About swapping. About any structure that keeps us safe. She stepped closer, close enough that her breath warmed my cheek, that I could see the individual flecks of gold in her brown eyes. What if it's just about you? For people who've spent months wanting you specifically. For archives of your unconscious moments. For witnesses ready to see what happens when you stop performing and simply receive. Jax's hand found my waist, tentative, asking. Marcus adjusted the camera to capture my face exclusively, my reaction, my unraveling. And Elena waited, her offer suspended in the air like smoke, visible and dangerous and utterly without precedent. I looked at each of them in turn, my husband who'd built this cage from my own blueprints, the stranger who'd studied me like scripture, the woman who saw my hunger and mirrored it, and the camera that would make it eternal. The lock held. The city breathed outside. And I realized the most dangerous choice wasn't yes or no, it was the possibility that I could want them all, separately and simultaneously, without hierarchy or shame, and that they'd prepared the space for exactly that impossibility. My hand found Elena's, interlacing fingers that felt like permission and promise. My other hand reached back, searching, and found Jax waiting, always waiting, patient as his camera work, hungry as his archived footage. And my eyes found Marcus, asking without words if this was what he'd wanted to build. He didn't answer with words. He pressed record. He leaned in close enough that his whisper became part of the audio forever. Show me who you are when you stop being mine and start being everything. And Elena's free hand was drifting lower, and Jax's breath was catching, and the space between possible and inevitable was collapsing to nothing when the second lock clicked. Not the door we'd secured. The minibar. Small, insignificant, except that someone had opened it, retrieved something, and the clink of glass on glass meant someone was pouring, and the voice that said, "Drink this first. Make sure you remember choosing, belong to." The minibar mirror reflected the recording I'd forgotten. My voice, slurred with wine from our first dinner with Jax and Elena, saying things I didn't remember saying. I want to be watched. I want to be the reason someone breaks their rules. I want to matter enough to be filmed, to be kept, to be revisited when they think they're alone. I'd orchestrated this before Marcus did. Before any of them. 3 months ago, I'd seen Jax's camera at the gallery and felt the weight of its potential attention, and I'd gone home and performed my desire into our closet camera, not knowing Marcus watched. Not knowing I'd planted the seed that grew into tonight's architecture. The revelation shattered the room's power dynamic. I wasn't the chosen. I was the chooser. The witness. The director hiding inside the performance of innocence. Play the rest, I said, and my voice had changed deeper, grounded, real in a way that made 4 people freeze. Marcus hesitated, then obeyed. The footage continued, me, alone, describing exactly what I wanted. 4 people. No hierarchy. Documentation. The specific angle of light I preferred. The way I wanted to be looked at, not possessed, witnessed. I'd drawn the blueprints. Marcus had simply built to specification. Elena's hand withdrew from my waist, her expression shifting from offering to recognition. You contacted me first, she realized aloud. The gallery. You asked about my husband's work. You knew. I had. I'd researched them, selected them, cultivated the friendship that felt like chance. The performance of spontaneity had been the deepest performance of all. Jax's hand fell from my back. The camera at the wedding. You knew I'd have it. I hoped, I corrected, gentle with their shock. I always hoped. The planning was insurance against disappointment. The twist wasn't that I'd been watched. It was that I'd been watching myself, archiving my own becoming, using 4 people as mirrors to see angles of myself I couldn't access alone. The intimacy we were about to share wasn't surrender. It was collaboration. I'd hired them without their knowledge, cast them in a film they thought was documentary, and now, finally, the director had to step into frame. Marcus killed the camera. The red light died, and the absence felt like blindness after staring at the sun. No, I said, reaching past him, pressing record myself. Keep it. Keep everything. That's what I wanted. Not the sex. The evidence. Proof that I existed this specifically, this hungrily, this completely. I turned to face them all, my husband who thought he designed this, the couple who thought they'd been selected, the technology that thought it was capturing truth. The final twist, I said, stepping into the center of the room, the center of the frame, is that I'm not becoming someone new tonight. I'm finally meeting who I've been all along. And you're not using me. You're introducing me to myself. Elena laughed, startled, delighted, free. Jax's expression shifted from wounded pride to something like gratitude. And Marcus, my architect husband, looked at me with the expression I'd been waiting 6 years to see. Not possession, not design, but recognition of an equal. Then what do you want? He asked, and this time it wasn't a command. It was an invitation to direct. I answered by reaching for Elena's hand, for Jax's, for the camera's angle myself. I want to stop hiding that I was hiding. I want the performance and the truth to finally be the same thing. The recording light held steady. The four of us breathed in the same rhythm. And I realized the climax wasn't what would happen next, it was this moment of claiming, of stepping from object to subject, from film to filmmaker, from wanted to wanting with full knowledge. But as Elena's lips finally found mine, authentic, witnessed, chosen, I caught Marcus's expression in the camera's reflection. The look of a man who'd thought he was building a cage for his wife's liberation, discovering he'd been inside her design all along. And I knew, even as the kiss deepened and Jax's hands found my waist with new permission, and the room's geometry finally collapsed into connection, I knew there was one more layer. One more archive. One more person who'd been watching longer than any of us knew. The closet camera had a backup feed. And someone else had been receiving it. The backup feed had been routing to Elena's studio for 6 weeks. She'd watched me watching myself, she'd confessed later, understanding before I did that I was directing my own becoming. She'd told Jax, and Jax had told Marcus, and the three of them had decided to let me believe I was hidden, preserving my performance of innocence until I was ready to own my performance of desire. The conspiracy of witnesses, she'd called it. The kindness of mirrors. We didn't sleep that night. We talked until the city outside began its gray pre-dawn exhale, for bodies tangled in configurations that shifted with the conversation, sometimes 2 and 2, sometimes 3 watching 1, sometimes all 4 sharing breath in the center of the bed like animals in winter. The camera recorded until the battery died, and then we used our phones, and then we simply remembered, which turned out to be the medium I trusted most. Marcus held me at 4 a.m., his chest warm against my back, his lips finding the place behind my ear where my pulse still hammered. I thought I was building your liberation, he whispered. I didn't know you were building mine. I turned to face him, studying the face I'd studied for 6 years and was only now truly seeing. You wanted to see me without your protection, I reminded him. You got what you wanted. I'm not protected anymore. I'm not even sure I'm yours. His smile held edges I'd carved myself. You're not mine. You're not theirs. You're yours, and you keep choosing to come back to me. That's different than possession. That's more frightening and more precious. Elena and Jax had fallen asleep against each other on the far side of the bed, her hand resting on his chest, his face turned toward her with the abandon of someone who'd learned that sleep was safe. I watched them breathe in rhythm and felt no jealousy, only gratitude for their courage, their archives, their willingness to be cast in a story they hadn't known they were auditioning for. When dawn finally came, it came through windows we'd forgotten to curtain, painting us all in watercolor pink and gold. Marcus reached for my hand, interlacing fingers that knew each other's shape, but were learning each other's weight anew. The footage, he said, hesitant in a way he rarely was. What do you want to do with it? I considered. The evidence of my becoming. The documentation of 4 people choosing to be seen. Keep it, I decided. Not to watch. To know it exists. To know we were real enough to record. Elena stirred, her eyes opening slowly, finding me immediately. She smiled without performance, Without offering, simply seeing and being glad to see. Breakfast, she mumbled. I need coffee, and then I need to tell you what you look like when you don't know you're being watched. Which is different, I think, from what you look like when you do. Jax woke to her voice, stretching, his hand finding her hip with the casual intimacy of people who'd learned each other's geography. He looked at me, then at Marcus, and the expression he wore was peace, not the hunger of archived footage, not the shame of discovered longing, but the resolution of someone who'd finally been seen wanting and hadn't been rejected. We ordered room service we didn't eat, too busy tracing the new borders of ourselves, mapping what had changed and what had simply been revealed. The camera stayed on its tripod, dead battery and all, a monument to the night we'd stopped performing innocence and started performing integration. By checkout time, we'd made no promises. No rules about seeing each other again, no definitions of what we were now. Elena kissed me at the door, lingering, real enough, and Jax hugged Marcus with the awkwardness of men who'd shared something they couldn't name. And then it was just us, my husband and I, walking to the elevator through a hotel that felt like a different building than the one we'd entered. In the parking garage, Marcus stopped at our car, not opening the door yet. The story you wanted, he said. The YouTube video. The narrative. How does it end? I thought of the footage, the archives, the conspiracy of witnesses who'd let me hide until I was ready to be found. It doesn't end, I told him. It just stops being hidden. The camera's still running, Marcus. We're just finally operating it ourselves. He kissed me then, in the fluorescent half-light of concrete and exhaust, and I felt the performance and the truth finally align, felt myself choosing him not from default or safety, but from the radical freedom of knowing I could choose otherwise. The kiss tasted like coffee and dawn and the specific courage of people who'd learned that intimacy wasn't about being seen perfectly, but about being seen completely. We drove home through morning traffic, his hand on my thigh, my hand on his, both of us watching the road ahead and the rearview mirror with equal attention, knowing what was behind us, choosing what was before. The camera's red light blinked in my memory, and I smiled, finally understanding that the story wasn't about being filmed. It was about learning to keep the lens open even when no one was watching.